Thanks very much for that, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this conference. I've very much enjoyed all the panels so far. I'm going to be brief, just give you a brief overview of some recent and ongoing work on a research grant that I'm working on. Alona asked me to speak on this part of the panel and speaking specifically about place. So I was thinking through some examples of things we've been looking at. Is the sound still going okay? People still hear me? Yeah. So I'm going to talk you through one example of grassroots memory practice in Colombia. So I'm going to be talking very briefly about the memory practices of a grassroots memory group in Colombia called SOSCUA. I'm going to be talking you through their practices in the public space. And in particular, I'm just going to focus on three key things which I think are interesting in terms of the work of this group. First of all, how they undertake interventions into the memorial space of the city, how they make use of mnemonic solidarity and lexicality, and their embodied practice and effective connections in the work that they do. So for those of you who haven't come across Corporación SOSCUA, it's a very small group. It was founded in 2007, based in Tunja, in Colombia, and it's a group that represents victims of the armed conflict within the department of Boyacá. Tunja is the capital city of that department. The name SOSCUA comes from the Muisca language, one of the languages of the Chibcha linguistic family, one of the indigenous languages of Colombia, meaning approximately to compose or to arrange well. And I think we need to think about this group in terms of its broader, the broader context in Colombia. Worth noting that that what we've seen in Colombia in recent years is what some scholars have termed a memory boom, where there's been a significant growth in memory work in the country. I'm taking this from Abias Oyola, who said that there's the recovery of historical memory that's officially supported as a result of transitional justice laws. But on the other hand, there's been thousands of local initiatives of memorialisation led by grassroots victims associations. And this is what I'll be showing you very briefly today. So SOSCUA have done lots of different interventions and activities, but in particular what I decided to select for you today is their memory wall, known as the Monumento por la Memoria, la Dignidad y la Vida. Lauren asked me specifically to think about space and place in the panel today, so this is why I selected this particular intervention from SOSCUA for you. Why is this important, or why do I think it's worth us thinking about what SOSCUA are doing? First of all, I think it's important to flag up the location of the wall. So SOSCUA chose to build their memory wall within the Parque Pinzón. This is an urban park in the historic centre of Tunja, just leading up to the Plaza Bolívar, named after General Pinzón, a conservative general from the War of the Thousand Days. The mandate to create the park in its honour was passed in 1903, and this was a period in which throughout Colombia, local elites, government institutions saw the park, the urban park, as a way of keeping the citizens in many ways in check. You can see some references there. And this park in particular was constructed as part of the centenary celebrations that were going on at the time. These centenary celebrations, many scholars have noted, have been part of these tools to foment, from a kind of symbolic perspective, the integration of the Colombian state. In the city of Tunja in particular, these centenary celebrations have been seen by scholars as kind of promoting the values of a positivist history, an official Historia Patria. So this is a space, in other words, the Parque Pinzón, its very name, kind of sets itself out as a space of the official kind of top-down state-endorsed values of both the urban park as a space where citizens can be given some free space but kept in check, and specifically regarding the centenary celebrations, a space which conventionally celebrates Colombia's official narrative of the nation. So what we can see in this memory wall is very significant. I've chosen to insert within this official space a non-official grassroots representation. Then looking a bit more specifically at what this wall contains. So the wall itself contains images on one side, and then it also contains ceramic works on the other side. On one side of the wall, we have rows of images, 119 currently in total, with the lowest row containing blank spaces for future images. And I think this resonates with lots of other memory initiatives, both within Colombia and beyond. So, for example, I think it resonates with some of the observations that Cara Levy has made about monuments in Argentina and also in Uruguay, about the sorts of monuments maybe cast doubt on the notions that memorials mark a closure of the past. So these monuments are open and assuming this, there will be future victims to be added to this wall. What I think is also really interesting about this wall is the use of the identity photograph. It's been noted in many scholarly works and indeed activist works themselves as well, the importance of the identity photograph for the Madres de Plaza de Mayo. It's an immediately recognisable, a transnational recognisable memory prop. And I'd like to suggest that what ZOSCO are doing here is they're engaging in this tactic of what's been called mnemonic solidarity. So they're using these identificatory narratives that we can read and we immediately would associate with Argentina and the mothers of the disappeared, and then reusing this in a Colombian context. That's one side of the wall, and then the other side of the wall contains 30 handcrafted artistic representations that are created out of baked modelling clay. Some key things to note here is that what we see on this side of the wall, we see very much a focus on the everyday. We see reference to low-key professions. There's a taxi that represents a taxi driver. There's a chicha pot, so the pot that's used to create chicha, the Colombian local fermented drink. These handcrafted, very much sort of everyday objects celebrate the lives of the victims who are represented on the other side of the wall in identity photographs. And they're very much celebrating them as normal everyday. They're not the elevated figures that this urban park would normally be exalting. Through some interviews with the women who were involved in the workshops creating these artistic representations, I don't have time to go into detail now or in terms of everything they said, but it's worth noting that when asked about their experience of creating these works in the workshop with ZOSCO, frequently they use lexicon related to the emotions, so amor, pasión, sentimiento, mis seres queridos, las emociones. And in some ways, I think this is significant because if the park, this urban park in which this wall is located, is traditionally a top-down space in which we have monuments by Magalón, who is the official sculptor who created the bust of Pinzón in the park. And he represents very much an auteurist, singular model of high art, artistic creation. What we see in ZOSCO's memory wall is a kind of a response almost the opposite to that. It's collective creation. It was these works were created by the family members of victims coming together and creating these artistic works together. And also, crucially, what we see on the memory wall, it foregrounds the material conditions in which they were made. So when you look at the artworks on the memory wall, you can see the thumbprints, the handprints. You can actually see the marks of the body of the people who created these artworks. So I think there's a sense here in which not just the fact that ZOSCO chose this park to put a memory wall in which is resisting those top-down discourses of the state, but even the very creation of the wall itself and of its contents. So in many ways, what I think we can read this through is examples that people have said about other contexts in terms of memorials. So conventionally, scholars have said that monuments are inert pieces of stone and they keep their past a tightly held secret. Monuments seem to remember everything else but their own past, their own creation. So Young is here saying that monuments don't tell us about when they were made. However, I argue that in this memory wall, what we can see, in fact, we can actually really see the actual tactile presence, and hopefully you can see here in these images. We very much get the sense that these were made, and this were made in a process of collective reflection here. And so I think what Susquehanna are doing is bringing into this memory space the vernacular. So the vernacular associated with everyday life, popular spaces, people's activities, and the monumental traditionally carries connotations of elitism and officialdom. What Susquehanna are trying to do is to bring this vernacular into this space of the urban park, which would be traditionally reserved precisely for the elitist and officialist line here. And I think there's some interesting parallels with some of the things that some of the speakers were saying in the previous panel in terms of the arpilleras and very much the kind of the tactile, the getting together, the creating as a collective, and the fact that these are embodied practices. I've actually taken this from Ramírez and Serpente, talking about embodied practices in other contexts, but I think this very much relates to some of the things that several of you were saying about the arpilleras as actually an embodied practice, the women coming together, sewing together, creating together. So hopefully this has just been a very brief presentation. I'm trying not to go over my allotted 10 minutes, but hopefully what I've shown you in terms of what SOSQUA, this very small victims association in Tunja, is doing. They're attempting to create memorial representations from below, and this often involves tactical negotiations, making temporary alliances to get the to get all this going, to get the wall in place. Hopefully what we've seen as well, that these kind of smaller actors in the mnemonic space can capitalise on this mnemonic solidarity to gain visibility, so using the ID shots, for example. We can see that counter memorial work is open-ended, refuses closure with the past, and this is crucial in the Colombian context in which we talk about transitional justice, but we're not yet in a post-conflict situation. We can see the memorialisation of the everyday, and that resists the monumental official discourse of the park, and instead presenting a collaborative, effective, handicrafted representation of everyday victims, which is challenging the very space of the park in which it's located. Hopefully I've kept the time there, and I'll now pass over to the next speaker.